Okay, I call the meeting to order. Roll call. Here.
Dave?
Here.
Otis?
Here.
Nancy?
Here.
Sally?
Here.
Thor?
Okay, are there any amendments to the agenda for the meeting? Hearing none, do we have a motion to accept the agenda?
I so move. I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have any amendments to the minutes from last meeting?
No, I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the past meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do we have any public comments? Hearing none,
Sorry.
let's move on. I don't see anything on the consent calendar or the public hearing items other than election of planning commission, chair, vice chair, and secretary.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we re-elect you as, or I put your name in, let's see, how do I have to do this? I suggest if you're amenable that you continue as chair. So I make a motion that we continue having Chris be our chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right. I nominate Dave as vice chair. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, Richard was our secretary, so who's going to be our secretary
Let's
now?
wait till next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Look at me,
so.
just because I'm a girl.
I make a motion that we delay the election of secretary till the next meeting. I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Oh, I have one other item while we're in the election process. I think Commissioner Dwyer would be excellent on, as a representative on that we haven't been able to find for the Historic District Committee, if she would be so willing.
Well, I'm interested in it. I'd like to know more about it. I guess by being a representative, I would learn more about it.
That's right. Well, there hasn't been a meeting, and we've needed to have somebody from planning and zoning on it. So I think it'd be a great, with your knowledge and your,
There's actually a good section on that
Yeah.
historical district in the new
Yeah.
code that we're talking about.
Cool.
So,
Sounds good to me, if you guys are up for it.
I think you get to appoint her.
I get a point, or we'll do a motion?
Or we could do a motion.
Let's do a motion.
Okay. Okay, I'll make a motion that Sally Dwyer be our representative from the Planning Commission on the Historical Commission.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do you have any commissioner comments? Liz, staff comments? That falls into the handbook. So,
Right, so starting on page 6 of your ginormous packet is the newly created Planning Commissioner Handbook for members. And this is the draft of it. So I'd encourage you to review it, and if anyone has any questions or think that we need to add something or take something out, just let me know, but I'll probably present it as a final at your next meeting. And it's just an internal document for guidance for the Planning Commission members. As such, I was going to highlight a couple of things that I thought would be useful for you to know. The Planning Commission is unique in a sense compared to other boards and commissions, as it makes two different kinds of decisions. One kind is called legislative decisions, and the other kind is called quasi-judicial decisions. When making legislative decisions, these are things like making amendments to the zoning map or amending zoning code or adopting the comprehensive plan. These are the decisions that affect potentially everybody in town. They're policy calls that are being made. In this capacity, the Planning Commission only makes recommendations to the Assembly. The Assembly is the one that's vested with these legislative powers, not the Planning Commission. So when you're acting in that capacity, you're just making a recommendation to the Assembly. Totally different is the Planning Commission's role as a quasi-judicial board. And these are decisions that the Planning Commission actually does make. Things like issuing variances, conditional use permits. It's a very narrow group of people that would be affected by those decisions. When you act as in your quasi-judicial capacity, you're supposed to be applying the code to each specific situation. It's not about whether the public wants this to happen or is opposed to having this happen. It's more about applying the standards that are in our code to each individual situation. So for an example, if you're issuing a variance, the variance has to comply with each standard that's in the code. And even if everybody's against it, if it meets all those standards, then the Planning Commission doesn't really have a reason to deny it. Same thing with conditional use permits. And the converse is true. If it doesn't meet the standard, but everybody's in favor of it, then you shouldn't be granting it. Okay? The role of the public is not necessarily a popularity contest. It's about providing more information to you so that you can apply these standards to your decision. So having said that, the most common things that you'll be dealing with are probably conditional use permits and variances, and those are described and laid out on page 14 of this, and also has some examples of when you would grant it and the kind of conditions that result in granting a variance. The other thing I want to bring up is called ex parte communication. Ex parte communication is basically hearing from one person only on an issue. So if you're downtown somewhere and you have an issue that you're taking up at the next meeting and this person has an interest in that issue and they talk to you about that issue, you should not be talking about an issue that you're going to be taking action on at a meeting as an individual, just one-on-one with someone. You should encourage that person to either send in written comments or come to the meeting. As a Planning Commission, part of the quasi-judicial role is like, quasi-judicial means acting like a judge. So all of you need to hear all of the information simultaneously and hear all of it at the same time, hear the same things. So hearing information from an individual outside of the Planning Commission meeting is not a good idea. If they have comments, they should send them to Karen. They should not send them to you individually. If you receive emails from an individual related to an action item on the Planning Commission, you should send that to Karen, and then Karen can send it to all the commissioners. You should not have information that everybody else doesn't have on any issue that you're taking action on. So if someone does, if you're not successful in dissuading somebody from talking to you, it's a small town, so I get it. It's important that you bring that up at the meeting and share with the rest of the commissioners that someone sent you something or gave you something or showed you something that they may not know about, okay? And so disclose that ex parte communication so that everybody has a chance to hear what you heard. But ideally, discourage it. Everything should come through Karen to all of you, not just one person individually. Also, speaking on behalf of the Planning Commission. As commissioners, you do not speak on behalf of the Planning Commission unless the Planning Commission says that you are speaking on behalf of the Planning Commission. So pretty straightforward. You're members of the Planning Commission, but the Planning Commission speaks as one. So only when the Planning Commission has taken an action or authorized you to speak on their behalf do you speak on their behalf. The other important part of the Planning Commission is defending and justifying your actions. Those are called findings of fact. Most of the time, a staff report that's included in your packet will have findings already. If the commission doesn't agree with the decision that the staff is recommending, then you're going to have to come up with your own findings. So it's really important that anything that you're basing your decision on is part of the public record, either because you've heard it at the meeting or we have a letter or something, and those things are cited as part of your decision making. It's not so important if it's really non-controversial, but if somebody appeals the decision, the only thing that we can use to defend an appeal is what's part of that record. So again, it's important that all that information be included and substantiated in your decisions. And then lastly, Robert's Rules of Order, which I think there's like a 2 or 3 page cheat sheet, which is as small as I could get it for Robert's Rules, starting on page 31. I think the key things to remember here are that you need to make a motion before you talk about anything. That motion needs to be seconded, and then you can talk. So, but until that happens, you don't want to be discussing your decisions, okay? And then also, once a motion is voted on, you're done talking about it, okay? You don't keep talking about an issue or an action after it's been voted on. That you're done, and then you move on to the next action item or the next thing on the agenda. I think that was about it for things to emphasize. And then there's exciting things in here like a short history of planning and all the legal authorities for your land use decisions from state regulation and borough regulation and on, just to sort of put it all in perspective of what you're trying to do and where the authority for the Planning Commission comes. Oh, and one last thing is public hearings. Again, and you hear Karen say this all the time, but it's pretty important for whoever's speaking to the commission to make sure to state their name and speak at the microphone so we get that recorded and it's included in the minutes. I think that's all I had.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I got a question, Liz. So one thing that I guess I was not doing, I mean, I had usually made it an effort to try and go take a look at places that we were going to be talking about in the next meeting. So according to this, you want us to state that we have actually gone out and taken a look at that particular parcel before we do anything? What exactly do you deem to be appropriate in terms of notification?
So some places discourage their planning commission members from going out and doing site visits on their own and say it has to be the entire commission. I don't think that's very realistic because I think in some cases it really provides some information. So I think as long as you say, you know, if it's the base, if you're using that as a basis for your decision, as long as you say, I went out there and looked at it and this is what I saw, and you're sharing that information with the rest of the commission, then I think that's the appropriate way to deal with it. But there are places where their attorney has told them that they should not make a site visit on their own. Personally, I don't agree with that, but that's certainly...
So I don't really want to have that be codified in this document, to be
No, it's
honest with
not.
you. It's not, okay, that's just in the handbook then.
It's not codified at all, and then the handbook doesn't say anything about site visits.
Okay.
So,
Right, because I mean, to me, personally, I don't know about everybody else, it's pretty hard to make a decision on something unless I go take a look at it,
Yeah.
because it's really hard to take a look from a flat piece of paper,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like, I mean, I can think of several instances when I went out and took a look at it, and it was completely different than what, you know,
Well, and the pictures that are included and the satellite image or anything else doesn't necessarily show what the real situation is.
I agree.
No, I think it's,
No. Like I said, I've been told that, but I don't really agree with
yeah.
you making a decision without seeing the place, because it's very different, you know?
so that brings me back to then why, okay, so I don't have a problem before every meeting stating that I went and looked at X parcel that we're going to be talking about in that meeting, if that's what you, that's what you're saying we should do?
I think that's best practice, yeah. If
Okay.
you went out and looked at it, just say, well, I went out and looked at it. And if you're using that as the basis for your decision, which I assume you would since you're actually there looking at it, it's kind of hard to unlook at it, right, when you're considering it. I would just mention that as part of my, I went and looked at it, and this is what I saw, and I'm using this for a basis of my decision, and just state it. Because we're not going to probably get a bus together and get everybody out there, you know, before every meeting. It's just not really practical.
I think we have a hard enough time getting everybody here for
Yeah,
the meeting.
exactly. Never mind meeting the bus, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so,
So I think we have to work with, you know, be practical too. I think that recommendation, even though that attorney,
probably a good idea, just to not have a lot of conversations with the people around the property or anything when you go look at it. It just, go look at it.
yeah, I would try not to have any conversations with people about what you have before you on the agenda.
Yeah,
You know, if they have something to say, they should send it in writing or come to the meeting so that everybody hears it. And if they don't care enough about it to make it public, then, you know, that's the deal. So,
anything else?
no, that's all I had. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments on the code that we've been working on?
I have some questions. When exactly are we going to start this process of presenting it to the public and to the assembly?
So I was just jotting down the rest of the year here. And so what you had told me before was that you wanted it at least a month in advance to look at. So I'm just giving it to you now with no expectation of specific discussion on it for you to review. And then I was thinking probably after, I'm doing the math here, right? After the New Year. So between now and the January meeting, it would be mostly informational stuff to try to do some informational things for the public to let them know that this is happening, and then have public hearings for Planning Commission in February and March with a recommendation to the Assembly, and then the Assembly to deal with it in April and May.
My only concern would be we should maybe move it up a month because of the Assembly's schedule with dealing with the budget in April and May. It might be better.
To have
If we
them
could-
do it in March, you mean?
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Do March, April?
Yeah, because they're going to be
Yeah.
really involved with the budget.
So then the Planning Commission's first hearing would have to be the January meeting on this.
And
we really should be going through and doing any detailed comments or anything we have to discuss with you by the next meeting, pretty much.
Yeah, except that I'm not going to make any changes based on anybody's comments. I'm only going to make changes based on a vote by the Planning Commission. So I'm going to submit this to you as a draft, and then as you review it, you're going to need to make amendments so that what I hear back is actually from everybody, not
commission.
just one
Okay.
person's comments. So I've tried to
So
highlight.
we should try to start going through it next meeting with, have everybody have comments to discuss it.
To discuss,
Make
yeah.
recommendations. And
And I tried to highlight some of the things that have been brought up, like, for instance, the home occupation square foot issue. If you flip through, the number is highlighted. I didn't change it, but it's highlighted as something that we should confirm or change or whatever the commission wants to do on it. But I know that's an area of interest, so, but it would be an amendment and voting on it. So.
okay.
So I would propose that we all come ready to the next meeting, have done our homework, and that we go through the document if we have any heartburn with anything and make any specific changes, that we try and do it at the next meeting in November if possible, so that Liz has an opportunity to receive our input.
Now, you said you'd already gone through sections 1 through 4, so it's basically 5 we're talking about tonight, or,
Well, I think we'll go through the whole
thing?
The whole thing.
but are we going to discuss 5?
5 is just definitions.
Yeah, there's some clarifications I'd be interested in on it.
Yeah, we could
Okay.
talk about it now or next month. Next month, that's up to you guys.
We could briefly go through it now, if you've got.
I just had 2, just real simple.
Okay.
Under B on page 245, a bed and breakfast inn is a structure designed for single-family residents or up to 2 or fewer guest rooms. So that's technically a B&B, but then you go over to a motel or hotel, and it's 3 or more. So my question is, are places like the Waterfront and Nordic House considered a hotel then, not a bed and breakfast? Because they have 5 or 6 or more rooms.
Right, they should be under the definition considered, even under the current
Treated
code.
differently?
Yeah, under the current code, this is it mirrors the current code. So if, it's really more for a bed and breakfast to be in a single-family residential or some sort of residential area. And so what we're saying is if you're going to have some type of B&B type thing in a residential area, it's got to be 2 rooms or less. But a hotel and motel, we would never allow it to be in a residential area. It would only be in a commercial area. So the zoning comes into play. But when someone comes to us and says, well, I want to put a B&B in, it's going to have 3 guest rooms, and it's going to be in a residential neighborhood, then we point to the definition and say, well, by definition, a B&B is only 2 rooms, so you cannot have 3 rooms in a residential area and call yourself a B&B. After 2 rooms, you're a motel and inn, and that can only be in the commercial area. Does that help clarify how we would use that definition?
That's an industrial, right?
Yeah,
Part of it?
yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious, because I know that it's always kind of boggled my mind a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't think it's in fact, in the current code, even though this is how we interpret it, it's actually, you have to look at 3 or 4 different places to come up with this definition, and so we've kind of put it all in. This is what a B&B is, and actually put in words what we actually apply, based on how it's always been done in the past. But we actually put it down in words this time, so you can actually look at there and see it.
Well, it's very clear. That's why I thought,
Yes, it's clear now.
Yeah. Thank
So
you.
now the confusing part then is commercial and industrial.
Yeah.
Industrial can't have bed and rest.
So
bed and breakfast, but
currently, in industrial, you're allowed to have a residence with a conditional use permit. And so technically, if you had a residence, then you could technically have a B&B in industrial, because if you did under the 2 rooms. But under this version, you would not be allowed to have a residence in what's going to be called heavy industrial, like true industrial zones. You can have a caretaker dwelling, and that caretaker dwelling is defined specifically with a certain square foot size. So you can't have a 2,000 square foot caretaker dwelling. You'd be able to have, I think it's a 600 or 650 square foot caretaker dwelling along with some sort of industrial use on that property. Could be storage, it could be anything, but there's got to be an existing industrial use, and then you're allowed that caretaker dwelling with a certain size limit. So this new code eliminates conditional use permits for residential uses in our true industrial areas. And if you'll notice in the zones, there's general industrial and light industrial. And what I'm talking about is general industrial. So it's going to be places like around PFI, around Trident, where Pacific Rudder is. So those really like truly waterfront heavy industrial areas. And then light industrial is probably going to be like Scow Bay Loop. You know, it's more of a catch-all where you kind of have a mix from residential to some sort of light industrial, but you're not really expecting anybody to put a processing plant, you know, on Scow Bay Loop Road. So you would kind of draw that line there where light industrial catch-all, but not necessarily that heavy manufacturing, and then general industrial for the heavy manufacturing, but you're not bringing in any residential uses in there. Did I make it more confusing or less confusing there?
That makes sense.
That's fine.
So my next question is, when are we going to do the rezoning?
So I think what we're going to do is, after you make your recommendation on the code, and while the assembly is doing their work on the code, then the planning commission will take up the map portion of it and start going through the map. Right?
Sounds like fun.
Doesn't it, though?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as I cautioned before, there's a lot of things in this document that once people realize what's in it, I think it would behoove us and you, Liz, if we highlighted the things that are going to create consternation with the public, so they understand it before the process begins, and say, here's the 10 greatest hits. Guess what? 650 square foot for a caretaker's dwelling in an industrially zoned property. Because a lot of people are going to have a hard time with that, because that hasn't been what we've been doing. So I'd suggest if we go through this, that we should highlight the things that are substantially different than the way we're doing things now, so that we can go in front of the public and say, okay, these are the changes, this is how it's going to impact you, and these are the reasons why we're making these changes. I think that's a better way to approach the public than to
Surprise. Yeah.
surprise, and then somebody comes into your office and says, what do you mean I can't do that anymore? So that's my only fear. We just
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
and I think I've used the analogy, you know, we've kind of been driving the horse and buggy here, you know, since the 80s, and suddenly there's been a lot of change in zoning code and how it's applied since the zoning code was adopted in Petersburg back in the 80s. And so you end up having to making these really major leaps, and it's different than what we've had in the past. I think it's overall a lot more positive, and I think people are going to appreciate the streamlined processes and having more stuff that can be handled really quickly. But it's definitely different, and there's a lot of loopholes that we've been asked to close because they end up before the assembly a lot of the times, and it's mostly direction from the assembly to try and define these things clearly and try and close those loopholes. So, but ultimately, people are going to have to agree that that's the right thing to do.
Yes.
I think it's a good idea. I'm not
No, I
saying,
know.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying we just want to be ahead of the process and let people know what's coming down the line.
I agree, and I think we need to maybe do a couple of specific outreach things with the assembly and also perhaps the Rotary Club, or just some places that we could go that there's enough people that we could talk to all at once, that explaining what's happening and kind of what we're trying to do,
Just very, very transparent, I think is what you're getting at.
and just be
Right,
more
yeah.
proactive than
Right.
instead of reactive, you know?
I don't want to see what happened with the comprehensive plan.
Well, I don't know that we're going to completely avoid that, but
Well, I understand that, but I mean, it'd just be better, like if I could go through right now and I could probably highlight 10 things that I know that specific people in town are going to have problems with. I think they're good that they're in here. I'm not disagreeing with them. I just think it would be good just to highlight them. So, hey, here's what we're talking about changing. If you have some issues with this, you need to show up and start letting us know what you think, because we might have missed something here.
no, and there's a lot in there, so
Yeah.
that would be helpful if there's a top 10 things you should know. The greatest hits, that's a good way to put it. The greatest hits of the new zoning code.
Well, now, these new codes, in the past, we've said it doesn't need to change. I mean, the use doesn't change until they go to rebuild, or is that still part of the process?
Yeah, everybody's grandfathered in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, there's no requirement to change anything. I think the one place there is on Main Street. I think you have 5 or 10 years to conform with the sign requirements. And I think that's current code, but it's never been enforced. So some things I think will surprise you that are actually in code currently, but aren't enforced, that just have been carried forward into this. But I think that's the only one where there's actually a time limit when you're supposed to comply with something that's in the code. But otherwise, everything else is grandfathered in, including lot sizes and existing structures. And in fact, it goes a little bit further and it's a little bit more lenient. When you have a grandfathered in structure, the way the current code reads, if you have a non-conforming use, so your use is contrary to what the code is, you're not supposed to expand that use. And it's been rewritten so that you could expand that use. Let's say you have the proverbial gas station in the residential zone or something like that, and you want to expand your gas station. Currently, we would say, nope, can't do it because it's not allowed in code. Under this one, you could expand it under a conditional use permit. So if everyone in the neighborhood is okay with it and you're a great neighbor, then go ahead and expand your business, and we'll just move forward from there. But so it's a little bit more lenient in some places, too. Maybe that'll make the top 10 list.
It doesn't have to be the negative stuff, it can be the
Exactly.
positive too. I mean,
Yeah.
we just need to let people know what's different from the way we're doing business now.
Right.
To how we'll be doing business in the future.
Exactly, and it's not all negative.
Right. Although I know some people will take it as negative.
It's different, so.
Yes.
I have questions about, I think we're still talking, on the part of when we were talking about quorum, and I know this assembly's been talking about, like via phone or something like that. And they decided, I think they decided for them that's not the way to go, that they talked about maybe the planning commission, and
So
I don't know if it went any farther than that.
the Planning Commission can create its own operating rules.
Oh, okay.
So if the planning commission wanted to have something different, you could have something different, as I understand it. And that's why the assembly backed off on it affecting other boards and commissions, because it doesn't affect what their decision is, doesn't necessarily affect it. If we don't have our own, then we follow the assemblies. But if you want something different, then you can adopt your own. At least that's what I understood.
I was just thinking for Karen, and she has such a hard time sometimes getting a quorum.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice if we had a better phone system. I can't believe we spent all this money on this building and we don't have a decent audio system. It's really hard to call in, if not impossible. I don't know if there's any way we can get around that. I mean, one board I'm on, we just put a cell phone in the middle of the room, and that has better audio quality than the system that's in the building right now.
One thing I'd make mention of is these particular microphones that if more than one person is talking at a time, they mute. So if there's any background noise as well, they will mute. So, roughly, which will come from a phone call as well. So if there's any background noise from that phone call, it will mute out that microphone. So you'll get dead air.
So my question is there any way that we could ask that they possibly take a look at the phone system to see if it could be improved so you could actually hear what's going on if you're calling into a meeting?
You could ask.
No.
You can
The
ask.
short answer is no.
You can ask.
Yeah.
They actually did get that
Yeah.
thing on the little cart over the,
Which is
Just
what
the-
we used when you called. And
Yeah.
last
Right.
night it was bleeding.
yeah, no,
Uh,
I don't disagree. I just
Yeah.
don't know that.
I participate in all sorts of boards that meet from all over the state, and, we have people calling in from, all corners of the state, and, you can hear just fine. So I don't know what the problem is.
Yeah, I was on a teleconference the other day, and I was hearing from Norway, from England,
Yeah.
seeing and hearing. It was great,
And it's-
perfect, no problem.
We get a lot of, a few times I've called in, it's been a lot of dropouts where you don't hear anything, or you can barely hear anything.
For the assembly race, we did Skype.
You could talk to Steve or Debbie. We got no control over it.
Okay, I'll do that. Because if we had better audio, where if you called in, you could actually hear, and you guys could actually hear us, then I think that would solve the problem a lot of times of us not being able to have a quorum.
I would like to address that. I spoke with Debbie last night during one of the breaks about this commission and that, and the quorum being either live bodies or over the phone. And she said in order for that to happen, an ordinance needs to be changed by the assembly. So,
Yeah, I don't think a planning commission should have a quorum by phone. I just went through the whole thing about quasi-judicial, and how you're all supposed to hear exactly the same thing and see exactly the same thing when you're making your decisions. And currently, I don't see how that could be possible if you weren't here. So your fifth person, perhaps could be somewhere else, but I think you need to have your quorum and your ability to stand in front of, the Alaska Supreme Court and say, yeah, we were all in the same room, we all saw the same thing, we all heard the same information, and we all came to this decision based on all the information that we all heard and saw. If you lose somebody and then you come back or the phone's garbled and then you still vote, and then someone comes back and says, well, that person didn't hear what I said because they were off the phone when that happened, then legally that whole decision could be overturned by the court. And I don't think it's, given technology right now, I don't think it's a good decision for the planning commission.
I think with a full commission, I don't think we'll have the issues of being able to get a quorum. We've been running on a short commission for quite a while, until just recently. So,
I don't think there's a problem with people, if we can improve it, for people to call in if we already have the quorum in the room.
yeah.
And that would
We
be
should
nice,
able
because then
to-
you just get more participation, and that would help.
Yeah. I think we can, with the number of people we have on the commission now, we shouldn't have a problem getting 4 people here.
If we have 7 people.
Yeah.
If we have 6, if we do have 7, but
Well, and if
we're going to
Richard
have a
puts-
hard time getting 4 people here,
Yeah.
so.
Also, at the next meeting, you'll have the chance to set the schedule for the coming year, and so you'll have 12 months schedule for the planning commission, and you'll know when the meeting is for the next year. So hopefully that helps people with scheduling.
We have any further discussion? We have a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Figure out what time.
What time?
Yeah,
Tell you that the
Well,
quorum thing
we-
was what got me to.
We have the schedule for the next one, right?
On Friday.
right today.
Write-in day.
Yeah.
November 9th at 4:30.
Do we have to keep
Decisions
doing
made
it at
with some
4:30?
People. He needs to stop.
We can. I mean, the reason we were doing it at
It's
4:30.
bad. Some people have a job, they got a project they
Right.
want to get going.